And we're back. This is part 2 of the energy balance chapter. Dr. Jenkins here. In the first part, we talked about the need for energy balance, that we have calories in through food and drink, and then we expend calories through basal metabolism, exercise, and digestion, and that over the course of days and weeks and months, it's ideal to balance that. And then we talked about regulation of that balance and all the things that contribute to that regulation. All right, so the next half, or it's actually a little bit less than half of this chapter, talks about when there is an energy imbalance. And it can go either way, right? So if you bring in more food than you expend, more calories than you expend, you're going to have an overall weight gain. Or if you expend more calories than you bring in, you're going to have a weight loss. Many times you don't want that, but there are some times when a person or when an athlete, there are times when an athlete actually wants to have an energy imbalance in a safe way to reach a desired goal. And that's what we're here to talk about. How to achieve weight loss or weight gain in a healthy, reasonable way. Okay, so some general information, and this is a number that I would like you to know. In order to lose 1 pound, you must have a calorie deficit of 3,500 calories. Knowing this number may make you think differently about reaching for those cookies. I love cookies, but I try to do it in moderation. But if I ever want, not when, because it happens all the time, when I do want extra, sometimes I think about this and it makes me say no. Other times I think about this and I say, you know what? Who cares? So let's say that you want to lose 1 pound of 1 pound of mass, okay? And when we say this, we're excluding fluid loss. You could easily lose a pound of fluid over the course of a night. This is why our weight fluctuates throughout the day anyway. If you really want to track your weight, you should do it at the same time under the same conditions. That's why a great time to weigh yourself, to be consistent, is first thing in the morning. But if you don't drink as much, you could easily lose a pound or more of fluid loss. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about actual mass. Could be muscle mass, but we probably want it to be fat mass, right? So if you want to lose 1 pound of fat, you've got to have a deficit of 3,500 calories. If I wanted to lose a pound in 10 days, so let's just play with these numbers a little bit. To lose 1 pound of fat in 10 days, each day you need to have a deficit of, if I just move the decimal place 1 point this way, I would need to have a deficit of 350 calories for 10 days. That may not sound like, or it may sound like a lot, but it's not too bad. Take one of those 24 ounce bottles of Coke out of there. That's 250 calories or whatever, right? So if you look at it that way, it's much more doable. Okay, so that's how you should be attacking this if you want to lose fat mass. Taking something away, and then if you also add a little bit of exercise, if I take away that 1 24 ounce bottle of soda and I add a 1 mile walk, I've got my 350 calories. Boom. That's definitely achievable. That's the way to look at it. But I would like you to know that number. In order to lose 1 pound, has to be a deficit of 3,500 calories. All right. So what if someone wanted to purposely lose weight, and it was someone that could stand to lose weight? If you have a 110-pound person who's an adult, they probably shouldn't be losing weight, just as an example. But if there's weight that can be lost and it's a reasonable thing, there's really 3 ways to do it. And we think about that energy balance, right? We have calories in and we have calories expended out. So it's no surprise. What are ways that we can lose weight? We can increase calories out by increasing our physical activity, or we can decrease what we eat, or we could do both. These are really the 3 ways to do it. Okay? All right. Let's talk about doing this in a healthy way. And when I keep saying healthy, it's very easy to ask, well, what does that mean? And it's hard because it can depend on a different person, their own size and weight to begin with, and also their situation. But if we wanted to give you a ballpark, what would a ballpark weight loss be? About 1% of body weight per week is about a healthy weight loss. Again, this is not the be-all, end-all, but it gives us a ballpark. So if someone's 100 pounds, that will be losing 1 pound a week. 150 pounds, losing 1.5 pounds per week. All right, you should know that number, about 1% of body weight. And it's in percentages, so that way we can establish it across different weights. All right, so here are 3 techniques. Increase physical activity, eat less, or do both. Okay, so what are ways in which we can increase physical activity in a healthy way? This is Pablo Sandoval. I'm not sure if he's still around or not, but he came back one year pretty chubby and did some things to lose weight. All right. Okay. So what I want to point out is, before we even start this whole conversation, the best method is to do both. I know we're talking about exercise right now, but the best method is to do both. Moderately reduce what you bring in, and then moderately increase here. It should never be extreme on either ends. That's the best technique. So the best technique is both, but moderately. Don't be crazy, people. It's not advisable. Okay, so exercising for weight loss. Well, one of the benefits of looking at calories out, that's this part of the equation, one of the benefits of including calories out is that you're more likely to target your weight loss to fat, right? You're going to keep your muscle and you're more likely to lose fat. Other benefits of including an increase in exercise would be exercising makes you healthy overall, can help you in terms of your cardiovascular system. It can also help psychologically. You feel better about yourself, you're getting out, you're getting vitamin D, maybe you're working out with others, all those things. Okay? How much exercise is needed? Well, if you want to lose weight, the gold standard for losing weight. So if someone wants to lose weight, it's always been the gold standard with exercise to prescribe a lower intensity, long duration. Okay? And the reason why is because if you work out at a short duration, your muscles are going to be using mostly carbohydrates, but as you work out longer and longer and longer, you're going to be losing more fat. Okay, so a long duration is good to lose fat. Now, my suggestion to people who would want to lose weight through exercise, I would suggest some cardiovascular stuff first, and I would add some weightlifting later. It's my belief that for someone who's never exercised before or hasn't done it in a long time, it's my belief that adding both at the same time can be a little bit, can be a lot to ask of them, and they might be more likely to not follow through. However, we are finding there's more research now that's coming out that's saying high intensity, short bouts over time can also boost weight loss. So you think like a circuit class where people, for 1 minute, you're jumping rope. And then you take a 10-second break. For the next minute, you're doing push-ups, 10-second break. For the next minute, so the individual activities are mostly strength, but you're doing it continuously for about an hour. That's okay too. So I think we're learning it's not only that the long duration loses fat, but you can have some short bursts just so long as the whole activity with small breaks in between is an hour at minimum. So it's really about, at least in my opinion, it's really about getting the person active in whatever way that they feel most comfortable. For weight loss, cardiovascular exercise is definitely the first benefit. And that's why I mentioned a longer duration. And strength is okay too, but you can still get a cardiovascular benefit if you do strength repetitions over the course of an hour or more. Don't worry about this number. Okay. When we talk about the substrate utilization, which is what the RER tells us, isn't it great how this all comes together, folks? In order to burn fat, for most people, they desire when they lose weight to burn fat, you've got to get that longer duration. Our muscles cannot burn fat right away. So if you want to target the fat, you've got to do exercise that you can maintain over at least 45 minutes to an hour. Now, does that mean that someone who's never exercised before has to work out an hour their first day in the gym? No. For some people, you've got to be realistic. Where are they starting? If they've never exercised before, a 1 mile walk that takes them 20 minutes, that's great. Because you know at least they're doing something and you're going to build slowly. You can read this bottom point. Duration remains the key. Overall weight loss is not completely determined by the calories expended. So even though I've made it a simplified balance beam where we said calories in versus calories out, the exact math isn't completely determined by total calories expended. Let me add the word completely. Because it does matter what nutrients you're burning. But no matter what, if you exercise for longer, you're gonna burn more calories. Okay? This is some interesting information in the middle, but you do not have to know it. Okay, I know I'm going through this quickly because exercising for weight loss can be a whole course in itself. I'm just trying to give you some of the basic information. All right? All right, so another way of targeting weight loss is to bring in less calories. We already know that in order to lose 1 pound of mass, not fluid, you have to have a deficit of 3,500 calories. Short-term weight loss, well, we know that water is going to be lost first. We know that. When we do calorie restriction, your body's first going to lose carbohydrates. It's only when we spread it out over a longer period of time that we begin to get rid of those fat stores. So your body is much more willing to dip into your glycogen stores because it's easier. I mean, let's just face it. It's not that your body is making an ethical decision. It's just the nature of how easy or hard it is. So when you have a calorie restriction, in order to fill in that gap, your body's much more likely at first to break into the glycogen stores because it's easier. It doesn't take as much energy. It's easier to do. But you've got to stick with it. Have a small to moderate calorie deficit over time. That's when your body is going to kind of kick in. Oh, wait a minute. This is our new set point now. Now we're only getting this number of calories. So now I'm going to dip into those fat stores. You could do this through a diet, but what I will say, though, is if you have repeated cycles of weight loss and weight gain, it makes the weight loss more difficult. So even though a diet might be a quick fix, the best thing in the long term, the people who are most successful are those in the long term that change their lifestyle. And what I mean by that is they get in the habit of not necessarily being on a diet, but making, how can I say this? Healthy diet always. So it's not a diet where, okay, these next 2 weeks I'm gonna cut my carbs to 20% of my calorie intake. That might work in the short term, but what's gonna happen when you go back to eating more carbs? You can't just go back to eating pizza and cookies. So the people that are most successful long term are the ones that adopt a healthy lifestyle overall instead of it just being a diet. Does that mean when I say a healthy diet overall, does that mean that you never have cookies? No, just be moderate in your intake. And when I'm talking about this, do I mean that a diet could never be good for anyone? Well, no. Some people, maybe if someone's really overweight or obese, that short-term low-carb diet can actually be a boost to boost some weight loss and to help them mentally. They're much more likely to stick to a program later if they see results quicker. You could look at it that way. All right. Okay, so what's best for reducing calories? Well, these are obvious things. Have it be a low to moderate reduction. You're not going to be successful long term if you cut 1,000 calories from your diet for a week. Pick a number that's more reasonable. The example I gave before was if you want to lose 1 pound of fat mass over 10 days, have a calorie deficit by 350 calories. That's doable per day. Or pick whatever is good for you, right? So a low to moderate reduction, not an extreme reduction. It's also better to not completely restrict foods. I know me, I can't speak for all of you, but I know me, I've got a sweet tooth. So if I don't eat something sweet every couple of days, or maybe even a little bit each day, I know that I'm going to end up binging on that whole bag of cookies come Friday. And that's not really good or healthy. All right, so drum roll, please. My cat's staring at me like, what am I doing? Like you would be if we were in class in person, but at least I have someone staring at me to get the same effect. Which has more of an effect independently? If you were to do one or the other, what would be more successful? And there's an answer, folks. This has been studied extensively, and we almost always come up with the same answer. Diet. Changes to diet are much more effective independently than exercise alone. And I think you can rationalize this, even though I'd much rather be able to eat what I want and go out and exercise and be okay. You know, someone could go to the gym and say, oh, I've exercised, now I'm going to stop for that ice cream. That's not how it works, folks. If you were going to choose one or the other, diet plays more of a role independently. And that's the harder one to change. It really is. It's a behavioral lifestyle change. And I don't mean to say it's easy when I'm talking about this. It can be very difficult. All right. Doing both together is the best way to go. Okay? This gives you an edge because you can do a little bit on both ends. So each one doesn't feel too difficult. It gives you the most flexibility. Hopefully, it will help you to develop a healthy lifestyle that you can maintain over time. And of course, if we do both, we've got a higher likelihood of success. Some miscellaneous things here. There is something called the spot reduction theory. And the spot reduction theory you've probably heard of on infomercials. Look at this Ab King Pro. The spot reduction theory would have you believe that if you purchase this Ab King Pro and you do these ab exercises for 15 minutes a day, you're going to have a six-pack. It's not how it works, unfortunately. We tend to lose weight overall. Now, if I go back and I say, if you use this Ab King Pro for 15 minutes every day, you will develop stronger abs. That is a true statement. If I use this and I'm working out those abdominal muscles, I will have stronger abdominal muscles. Absolutely. That's different than saying if you work out with this Ab King Pro for 15 minutes per day, you will lose weight in your abs. Strengthening those muscles is one thing, but losing the weight over top is a different thing. The spot reduction theory says that when you exercise a certain area of the body, that is where you will lose the fat. But that is not true. We tend to lose fat overall. Just by doing an ab exercise doesn't mean that I'm going to lose the fat over my abs necessarily. Okay. And something else I also pointed out, men, because of their higher basal metabolic rate, men tend to lose weight more quickly than women, which can be frustrating for women. But that's just the way it is. Not always, but like I said, these are trends. Okay, so how does this relate specifically to athletes? Well, we can say in general terms that reducing body fat improves performance. So for most athletes, being leaner is going to make you perform better. A sprinter, absolutely. The leaner you are, you've got less weight to propel. The leaner you are, you're likely to have more muscle strength. The leaner you are, there's less drag when you try and move your body through space. The leaner you are, let's not forget about thermoregulation. The leaner you are, the easier it is for your body to send fluid to the surface of the skin to sweat. This isn't always the case. You could think about a lineman and sometimes the extra mass, because you can only build your muscles up to a certain point. So if I want a lineman to be 300 pounds, there's going to have to be some of that that's fat. And the nature of their exercise demands, they don't have to move very far. The nature of their demands being that the more weight I have, the more I can push the other dude around. So that might be an example of an exception. But we can also talk about some of the pitfalls. And there are certain athletes, in all sports actually, but there are certain sports in particular, like wrestling. There are certain athletes that are going to be more prone to quick periods of weight loss or having to, quote unquote, cut their weight. My background is I was trained as an athletic trainer. So I worked with the wrestling team when I was in college. I went to a college where our wrestling team was Division I. And it was my job to certify the wrestlers at a certain weight. We were an NCAA school. So every week I had to certify the wrestlers at a certain weight. And that was the weight that they were going to be able to wrestle at for the upcoming meet. Well, it wasn't that long before I was there. This was 2001, so I'm aging myself. But the NCAA had just come up with guidelines. And they said, when you certify your wrestler at a certain weight, they have to pass a hydration test. And that was one way of making sure that these athletes weren't cutting weight. If these wrestlers, what do you want to do? What would be ideal? Well, what would be ideal is if you're wrestling at a 149-pound category, that you're 149 pounds. Because you want to have the most muscle mass and the biggest weight you can. Well, for many athletes, that can be very difficult to teeter on the edge throughout the week. Maybe they're 152 pounds. So right before they certify at that weight, they've got to get down to 149. Easiest way to do that is to cut water loss. But now the NCAA has come in and said, well, people were being irresponsible. They were exercising in trash bags, in suits that made them sweat more so they could lose more weight. But then people were dying. People were having heat illness. So it can be a difficult balance to make for those athletes. And at the high levels, these athletes, most of them, have this struggle. And, for a year or two at that high level, you can make an argument that, well, I'm not doing long-term damage. But you really got to think about it. If you have a high schooler, that's not really an age where you want to be doing extreme weight loss. They're still growing. That's a different conversation when they're 15 or 16 versus when they're 21, right? Okay, so cutting weight is not good overall. Sometimes it's a necessity based on a sport, and all you can do is try to do it in as healthy a way as possible. Okay, on the other end, there are some instances when an athlete wants to gain weight. And sometimes this can be just as challenging. You know, it's easier for me to joke because I don't have this problem. If I wanted to gain weight, I would just eat whatever I wanted for a week and I would happily see my numbers go up. But for some people, based on their genetics and their basal metabolic rate, they have a high metabolic rate and their body burns calories quickly, so they may be at a need to gain weight in a healthy way, and that can be difficult. The best way to do it is, as we said for weight loss, to work on both ends of the spectrum. Of course, for an athlete, you wouldn't want, so if you have our balance beam, these are calories in, and these are calories out. To gain weight, what would you want to do? To gain weight, I'd want to eat more and exercise less. But for an athlete, exercising less, that's not a good idea. So instead of exercising less, for an athlete who wants to gain weight, they could focus more on strength training. That's more likely. I can't talk and write at the same time. Focusing on strength training is more likely to get them to increase their muscle mass and not necessarily lose fat mass. So a moderate increase in healthy foods and maybe a focus more on strength training. But it can be challenging. I've given you an example up top. You don't have to know those numbers, but it's just some numbers to give you a ballpark if you're interested. My recommendation is not to rely on supplements for either weight loss or weight gain. The way to do it over a lifetime, is really to change your lifestyle. All right, so hard work is really the only answer, and I know it's not what people want to hear. All right, folks. Good job. I'll see you for the next chapter.